Hello everyone, this is day 9, it is December 16th, 2009, and this is Day 9 Daily number 37. It turns out that I went live and didn't have my microphone plugged in, so you just saw me talking, and although it's just fun to see me wiggling around in front of a camera, it is my soothing voice with the reassuring thought hammer I bring down on StarCraft games that all of you are really tuning in for. So I'm really excited because I didn't have to cancel today. Yesterday I canceled because I was awake for 48 hours straight. Well, I cheated. I took like an hour nap, but oh god, I just was awake forever. I was awake for so long. Okay, so get this. This is what I had to do. Not only did I have a final project due on like Monday that I had to like stay up all night for, just like finishing that up, but the people who pay for my school is a research team at UCLA, and they do educational research games. Because most educational math type games were just commercial products that people are making to make an extra buck and that sort of thing, but these people actually want to see the effect of games on people's ability to learn things, and I'm the guy who makes the games, and they're the one who, there's like 15 of them, and me and one other guy who are making it. Or excuse me, 15 of them with all their opinions and thoughts because they're education researchers, then me and one other guy making the game. Actually, the same partner who I worked on The Alchemist with. So I had to stay awake for 48 hours, and then I had to just be around a bunch of high schoolers for 6 hours. Oh, man. Not just regular high schools, but like at-risk high school students. The kind of high school students who are like on their 5th, 6th, 7th year learning mathematics. So after that, I had to just like sleep and just sort of try to forget the world after that one. But now, I'm back. I'm going to do a little bit of awesome Protoss vs. Protoss action. We're actually doing Stork versus Best. Now, I like Stork a lot. I also like Best a lot. And I left my door open a lot. So I'm going to go shut it so that way none of my roommates come in and invade. He's also playing Splosion Man out in the main room. And if any of you have played Splosion Man, a ton of screaming always happens with Splosion Man. So just want to keep that to as low of a level as possible. Unless it's, of course, me screaming. So yeah, let's just go on over to the main screen. We have Best versus Stork on Outsider SE. It's a little bit of an improvement. I'm surprised, first of all, that they called it Outsider SE. Normally, they call it Outsider Neo or something, you know, like Neo Outsider, Outsider 2.2, which is another way of saying Outsider, whoops, we messed up in the first one. The only really significant difference that I'm really going to mention is the fact that you get an extra mineral patch in your main. It's one of those short mineral patches that mines out real fast. That trend sort of began around Longinus, but I always sort of like that. You know, you have 10 mineral patches in your main, so you have a lot more opportunity to do one-basing strategies. We've seen a lot of 2 gates come out of players on Outsider against Zerg, that sort of thing. But the main thing that I really want to emphasize in this game is all about harassment. Stork's going to spawn up here, and Best is going to spawn down here, and it's all about the cool techniques that Stork uses to really batter down Best and the effect that harassment has on him throughout the game. So first of all, I originally saw Kal do this on this map, where we unload 2 Dragoons here very early on. We just try to harass the workers mining right here. And occasionally we'll even get like 4 Dragoons here and try to micro back and forth and take out as much as we possibly can. We're going to see how that's a real big advantage for the aggressor right there. And Stork actually ends up expanding a little bit later than Best. So I did like this game quite a bit. Yeah, there's Stork spawning at the north. I like this game so much because it really helps you think about harassment in a very, very clear, example. So actually, I'm just going to pause for just 1 minute. Let's spend a brief period of time talking about harassment so we all know what we're prepared to view in this game. So, in general, people tend to think of harassment as this sort of always good thing. Like, you know, if you can storm drop, and you storm, and even if you kill off a drone, nice work. You storm drop them, cool. Or even players sometimes will drop, this is the most common thing ever, they'll drop a Reaver when the shuttle is clearly going to die, and they'll just try to get a shot off. And they might even kill something like 5-6 drones, but then they've lost a Reaver and a shuttle, and maybe even a Zealot or 2. And that actually, for the harasser, is a huge loss. Big loss. So what we want to see in this game is 2 players, both of whom have great fundamentals, who are playing incredibly well. We're going to look at how much Stork invests in harassment and how it just gives him a minor edge. And that's what you should be going for in harassment. Not these wild sort of, oh my god, I dropped and kill off every single worker he's ever made in his life, and then you win like 5 seconds later. That's never going to be the case with harassment. So just so that way we're clear on that. Going to come right back here to the game. So here we have both players continuing to mine away. So there's a little bit of a short mineral patch. You see it's missing that sort of mineral patch hat. I think it's just slightly shorter, maybe 1,000 minerals. I haven't actually investigated it too much. But there are, in fact, 10 mineral patches. Yep, see, there's the other little short mineral patch who's missing his mineral hat. Oh, man, I have not slept this much in my entire life. I'm just, like, loopy, but oh my god. I went to bed at 2:30 a.m. last night, and I woke up at 5. I, like, barely woke up in time for the cast. It was awesome. It felt so good. First thing to note, a lot of Protoss players are going to be building those first pylons much closer to their nexus. First of all, because they're not really scouting very early. And also, a lot of times we like to build structures, and then we like to build pylons here, like in our own mineral patch. That way we can prevent the manor pyloning. Also, it's useful to keep things really close to your base. Close to your nexus, because then it makes dealing with any sort of early zealot harass a little bit easier. Stork being a little more aggressive with that early building placement. I love thinking about early building placement. I mean, a lot of people just sort of build buildings, and they're like, yeah, you know, whatever, just throw it down. And they end up with inconsistencies. You know, one game they'll end up with something like this, where they have a pylon really far away from the nexus, and the next game they'll just sort of, you know, haphazardly place it right next to their nexus. And what I would like, ideally, for any of you who are just, you know, thinking about super early stages of the game, be incredibly consistent with your building placement. Because whether you choose to do best style or Stork style, where you place it a little farther away or extremely close, I should say style for this game, both of them have done that. But whether you choose to do what Stork did this game or what Best did this game, just be consistent about it. Because what you'll see is as you play maybe 30, 40 games with this exact same building placement, you'll start to see what the advantages and disadvantages of that placement can be. So for instance, if you're playing this style with Best, where you keep everything really close to your nexus, you might realize, man, it's a lot easier to hold off zealot harass. Or maybe you have it really wide open like this, and you say, man, I really prefer to micro in these open areas against the zealots, and that makes it easier for me to hold off zealot harass. These are all sorts of things you want to think about for your early gameplay. Oh, excuse me. So a lot of players like to throw in a zealot right now. See, there's the pylon going down in the base. Now, normally you have enough money to build a cybernetics core, but instead of that 200 going here to a cybernetics core, it's 200 going to the pylon and to the first zealot. Built there to prevent the manor pylon, all's well and good. Built there, this is also really good, this pylon placement. I actually want to talk a little bit about that. And bam, positive. This is also really good, because if we have a zealot in our base and it's running around, it can't run behind our mineral patch. So in a sense, if a zealot runs this way, we've cut it off. It also clogs a hole for the zealot to get through. I mean, this hole's still open, but we can eventually clog that one. Like that pylon placement quite a bit. Also really useful if you're playing against a Terran player, to put pylons back there or other things to clog up the back door, because all Terran players love doing vulture harass. But because control with Protoss is so good nowadays, they have to drop the vultures and then walk over to your mineral patch, and if you have it just walled off from all sides, then you'll be in great shape. So unfortunately, Stork loses his early probe, but of course we're going to see Stork play an incredible, incredible game, so not too big of a deal. I'm just real happy that Stork's doing well these days. I mean, he's been losing a pretty decent amount in Pro League, but in the OSL, he was 3-0 in his group with Flash. Oh man, I love Stork. Yep, see, there's the other hole getting clogged. Such good positioning to have this be able to power that. Awesome placement. Also, those holes are nice because it clogs Reaver shots as well. Another thing that's a huge issue in Protoss vs. Protoss is those pesky Reaver drops. Yep, see, another thing being dropped back there. Sort of, I don't really want to say preventing mobility, but preventing the important points of mobility for an aggressor. I mean, if you build a pylon back here, it's never going to screw you up. It can only screw your opponent up, so that's why we like it quite a bit. Oh, look at this magic. By the way, for those of you who don't know about this, if you hold shift and hit tab, it turns your opponent red on the minimap, and if you hit tab again, it actually turns your things red. See, look right here. They hit shift tab, bam, bright red. For some reason, I thought I may have had color blindness, and suddenly I cured it, maybe by having a stroke or something like that, but apparently they just shift tab. They just want to make sure everyone else was aware of that as well. 2 early zealots from Stork, also very useful if you want to do any sort of early teching by getting a Reaver Bay early, or by getting range upgrade. Completely reasonable thing to do, to opt to get the zealot and to get the Dragoon range very quickly. Both players doing the identical thing. Part of the reason why I did choose this game, because I wanted a great game to demonstrate how both players are doing something really similar, but one player starts harassing a lot. and ends up with a slight edge. Not a huge edge, but a slight edge. And I'm going to reemphasize that again and again and again. Both players trying to keep an eye on this close edge of the ring. See, I always refer to this outside edge of expansions as the outside ring, and this is like the shared edge of the ring. So both players want to keep track of that shared ring. And right here we see a pylon built from Best. And what Best is doing right now is like the most normal Protoss vs. Protoss thing in the world, right? Best is just one gating, getting a very early range, and then expanding right back here. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about that early range. We get early range in Protoss vs. Protoss because of the timing window that revolves around that, where if you have Dragoons and I have Dragoons, but mine have a little bit more range, I can actually rape your Dragoons, and it's like not even close. Sometimes you'll see someone who has 2 Zealots and 4 Dragoons against 2 Zealots and 5 or even 6 Dragoons, and the player with the fewer Dragoons will have gotten range earlier and can do significant damage and even things out, or in some circumstances even overtake the other side. So, we get this early range upgrade so that we can deal with any sort of aggression and make sure our expansion's ultra safe. Because the last thing we also want is to take this expansion and have our opponent drop Dragoons with range back there and be able to shoot our probes, but we can't do anything about it. I like this pylon placement by Stork, building it all the way over here. It helps us keep tabs on anything moving up along this edge. Both players trying to sneak over to their opponent's edge of the ring. So that way they can pop on over. We see Stork trying to just do a little scouting action over here. Now this is the sort of scouting that you should do. Whoa, full screen. I'm going to be pausing a lot because this game's actually fairly short and there's a lot of meat in it. Whenever you scout, make sure that you know what you're trying to scout. A lot of players are just like, I wonder what he's doing, and they just sort of go over there. The classic example is in Protoss vs. Zerg, where the Protoss player gets the Corsair. A bad Protoss player says, cool, I want to know what he's doing. And then when the Protoss sees what the Zerg's doing, he says, well, what do I want to do now? What a good Protoss player does, the Protoss player gets that Corsair, scouts the Zerg, and says, if I see a Spire, I'm going to do this. And if I see a Hydralisk Den, I'm going to do this. Very distinct decisions have already been made, and all you need is that extra little tipping point. So what we see right here is this probe scouting right at the time that this Nexus is building. Because this is clearly a point where Stork is going to be making some sort of decision. We see that there's a robotics facility being made in Stork's main. Stork, you see, look right here. I want to point out this because it's very, very subtle. Notice that this probe just got here, and this robotics bay is just now been started. What potentially could have been going on here is that Stork says, if I scout right here and I don't see this expansion, I'm going to need to be getting an observatory very soon because my opponent could possibly be going Dark Templar. But when he sees an expansion this early, he just says, great, I can go for the Robo Bay and then not worry about observers that quickly. Very key point. Notice that the scout of this probe lined up with the completion of that robotics facility. Also probably this, actually not probably, actually certainly what's going to happen, because I've seen this game, is that Stork sees that expansion and says, great, now I know that I want to be moving out a little bit earlier, such as right now, so that way I can get in a good position to do this drop with this shuttle. Now watch the paths of these things. This is just such awesome play. Moving out with the ground units this direction, and then sort of going diagonally with the shuttle. And notice how the shuttle's always a little bit behind these units. And also notice that in the process of doing this harassment, everything else that Stork is doing is extremely normal. A lot of players tend to just do these wild harassments with no sort of underlying stability to them. But not Stork. Stork is so cool. And of course, I'm focusing a lot on Stork this game because he's going to be the aggressor. He's going to be the harasser in this match. But Best also plays phenomenally well, which we're not getting to quite now, but later on in the game we'll see how important it is to respond to harass appropriately. So we see the Dragoons coming out right now for Stork. Stork's just getting the probes to move back. And notice that this is a very gentle harassment. He's not now running up here and trying to kill this off. He's just saying, yeah, I'm going to stop these guys from mining for a little bit. Very gentle harassment. So right now, Stork is expanding later than his opponent did. I mean, clearly, Best already has a Nexus finished, and Stork hasn't even begun one. But this is the sort of play that we're making as Stork right now. We're saying, I'm going to let you expand underneath this beautiful Korean banner. I'm going to let you expand to this bottom area. Actually, let me just bring the map up. I'm going to let you expand to this bottom area early. But I'm going to harass and do so much damage here that even though I got my expansion later, we're even. I mean, ideally you want to be ahead, but you should assume that your opponent's going to play well and that you're going to be slightly even. If not, you're going to be a little bit ahead. And what we're going to see is how good Best is at making sure that it's still even. This is why the attacker right here has the advantage over the defender. It's because the defender has to work his way into these little slots of the mineral patches, whereas the aggressor can just make perfect concaves. And see right there, we already have one Dragoon going down for Best, and pretty much full life for everything down there, except one Dragoon has a little bit in the yellow. And see, look at this nice timing of the expansion, but still everything's very normal from Stork's point of view. Still having spotters over here, moving forward a little bit here, getting some ground advantage. Ground advantage is really awesome whenever you're being the aggressor. You can always get good map control in this fashion. And see, look at how this harassment's going to go, just carefully pulling back. Unfortunately losing one, but still able to take out one from his opponents. And see, he's moving forward here, trying to get this 3-on-1, sometimes this 3-on-2. And look at this. This is another key aspect of harass. If you can manage to take out a shuttle like that, and then see pulling right back to punish this leftover guy. Oops, we have the Dragoons popping right on over. Now, a completely reasonable question is, why didn't Best pop all his Dragoons over right there to begin with? And the answer is that notice that Best only just recently got a shuttle. If you try to get a shuttle at that timing and you're popping guys over, you leave yourself vulnerable everywhere else. I mean, sure, you can pop a bunch of Dragoons over to stop these handful of Dragoons, but then your opponent just attacks your front and you have no way to defend it. Because Best early expanded, he really can't afford to keep his stuff that thinly spread. I mean, look right here, only 2 Zealots at the front. Imagine if Best had popped all his Dragoons over, if he'd committed to that bottom left area. His front would be completely wide open. So naturally, we're kind of forced to get an Observer as Best. We're not positive of what our opponent's up to. And more harassment coming here from Stork. Now, traditionally, in really all matchups, players will do 1 or 2 key moments of harassment, and that will strengthen their ordinary main push. But what we're going to see is Stork just be incredibly aggressive to this edge. Look at that. Oh, man. Ugh, 6 kills. Or maybe that was 8, but it's too low res to see. I actually think it was 8. Man, incredibly aggressive harassment. Now, let's see 2 gateways coming down for Best. Notice how Best is not abandoning anything. He's not overreacting. He's playing very calmly. And notice that he's still at, a bit of an economic lead. He's able to get these 2 gateways up earlier than Stork. We haven't really directly seen it. Oh, excuse me, sorry, some of that Coca-Cola I drank's coming back up. So if you look at the mini-map, only 2 gateways there for our friendly neighborhood, Stork. Best has gotten them out very early. And look at Best being real proactive about scouting. It's unfortunate that his opponent got the gas expansion up earlier, but right now Best is almost certainly at a little bit of a mineral advantage. And Stork going to continue to be aggressive. Come on, let's go down to the important part. Yep, we have the Observer, just really scouting that out. And this is very uncomfortable for Best. Notice how these units, we just saw more Dragoons from Best scoot over to this left base. And then, of course, they're scooting away from the ramp. Real aggression going on by Stork. This is one of my favorite parts about watching Stork play, is that the longer the game goes on, the more of the advantage Stork has, because he just makes such incredible late-game decisions. Again, these are much later than Best's. But anyways, Stork made such incredible mid- and late-game decisions, which means that whenever Stork is playing really aggressively in the opening, it means that Stork has this really well-thought-out plan for the later stages of the game, which is specifically why I'm choosing a Stork game for this sort of harassment. Because look, he's still trying to harass, and he's using that harassment to contain, and Stork isn't doing anything insane. He's not going for an all-in at the front. He's not expanding a million times. He's just getting an expansion with gas up a little bit later. Unfortunately, he delayed his opponent, and he's getting that nice concave contain right there at the front. Here comes some more harassment. Now, we're going to watch some incredible decision-making go on by Stork. This really isn't, I mean, all players at this level make good decision-making, but I just was really impressed every time I see something great like this by any player. Now, watch this. We see this great little up and down move by these Dragoons, And Stork immediately just targets the other 2 Dragoons. This is the easiest thing in the world to kind of like let your Reavers do their thing, or maybe even abandon. But look at that, just going straight for those 2 Dragoons. And then, alright, you want to micro your Dragoons? Sweet, I'm going to micro my Reavers. Still keeping the advantage on this outside ring. And then look, he leaves. Look at that. He just left. That is such good harassment, right? We went in there, we did some damage, we killed off some Dragoons, and now our opponent is regrouping to hold it off even more effectively. Well, we're not even going to be part of that. We're just going to leave. I mean, it's almost like if you're playing Zerg vs. Terran and you get Mutalisks, your opponent has to get a bazillion turrets. And if you never attack those turrets, your opponent's wasted money. He's built defense for something you're not even going to attack. And that's what we saw right here, that Stork had his Reaver there, and he's not going to battle all this great defense that Best was about to set up. He's just going to abandon it and do something else. See the Templar tech coming down for Stork right now, and I like that choice to go for the Templar tech right now, because if we think about it, we're about at an equal economy, given the amount of harassment that's going down there, except we have gas as Stork. So it's pretty much just going to be Dragoons, Slow Zealots, and Reavers from our opponent, and if we have Dragoons, Reavers, and Storm, we're going to be at a significant advantage. It's probably going to be a lot easier than if we'd done something like flown our shuttle into Dragoons. Excuse me, it's going to be something a little bit easier than if we just added on gateways and gotten, 4 or 5 extra Dragoons or something like that. Because, I mean, if you think about it, if we added on extra Dragoons as Stork, and we got those 4 or 5 extra Goons instead of Templar, we know Best has gotten his gateways up earlier than us, so that probably means we're just even in terms of unit count. Stork being very, very careful. Still has a lot of Dragoons in his base. This is a big mistake that tons of players make whenever they have a containment, as they just rally to the contain. 4 Dragoons up there. We have more Dragoons coming back. There's 2 Dragoons at that expansion. Just love this play by Stork. Oh, he's so cool. And what Best is doing right now is the correct play. Just continue to expand along the outside ring. I mean, sometimes, and this is kind of unique to Outsider, a player will be really aggressive to you down here. Will be like coming in at your front, preventing you from expanding to your natural. And you'll just expand twice to your 2 mineral outside expansions. And your opponent will get way behind on resources, even though he's trying to do all this fancy aggressive stuff. It's one of my favorite aspects about this map. Whoops. Basically unloaded those Reavers just in time to take a shot for both of them, and then just loaded them back up and left. Really showing the power of containment in this matchup. You don't actually need too much gas if you're going Dragoon Reaver, especially if you want to throw in some extra Zealots. So that's why we're seeing still predominantly Dragoons and Zealots coming out for Best, even though he's getting that other mineral expansion up. And look at Stork, still has not expanded. Just use that harassment to get a little bit of an advantage, get a little bit better tech setup, and then here comes yet more harassment. This is the usual sort of thing. This is what Outsider's great for, is when you drop in between the expansion and the main. Really good in Terran vs. Protoss to drop a bunch of Vultures there and set mines in between, and then drop a tank behind the mineral patch. And this Dark Templar harass is really incredible. Now, most people who are watching this game live will say, man, Best is getting owned, man. God, Best is just getting crushed. I mean, even this was real bad. I just saw this and I was like, oh, poor Best. So I'm going to... Let's keep that in mind, right? The fact that Best lost pretty much a bunch of free units and a bunch of probes to this harassment. And it looks like Stork is in an incredible, incredible lead. So actually, I'm going to stop right now, and I just want everyone to remember the state of this game, and let's think about it for just a little bit, right? Stork has done a ton of harassment at the bottom left expansion. He's dropped Reavers and Dragoons there to do a lot of damage. We just had the Dark Templar drop happen. We've contained our opponent, so... we, as Stork, have our expansion a lot earlier, our gas expansion a lot earlier than Best. We've contained Best, so we obviously have that concave advantage. Our opponent just lost a bunch of shuttles with Reavers, potentially for nothing. Most people are going to be like, man, Stork has this game easy. This game is his. It's in the bag. But what I want you to think about is the fact that Best has not committed money to any sort of harassment. He didn't have to commit money to Templar tech or to those Dark Templars. He didn't have to build all those extra Reaver shots. He didn't have to build all those extra shuttles. He hasn't spent a lot of money on the things that Stork has spent money on. So what we're actually going to see is in the big battle that comes up, the players are a lot closer than one might think if one isn't very comfortable with these sorts of harassment-heavy games. And that's why I love this game so much, is because it really demonstrates how important it is to just hang in there if you're being harassed a lot, because it's costing your opponent a hell of a lot, too, to do that sort of harassment. Continuing to drop my pens, as I do throughout every single Day 9 Daily. Big army moving forward for Stork, and look at this choice. A lot of players are going to think, well, why don't I expand to this expansion here, or this one here? Why is it that Stork is expanding to this one over here? Well, if we have a big army in the center, what is the easiest place to defend for a center army? It's going to be the other main. Or even one of these center expansions, one of these mineral onlys. Absolutely last thing in the world it's going to be is these ring expansions. So for instance, let's think about Terran vs. Protoss. Early game in Terran vs. Protoss, the Terran expands to his natural and then expands to these ring expos. And the Protoss player takes his natural and then takes the other main and the other natural. And then when Terran moves out with his killer death push and starts killing everything off, and the Protoss starts killing off these ring expansions, the Protoss suddenly takes control of the ring expansions and the Terran player takes control of the middle and the other main. Always important to think that the reason that's the case is because both players are simply taking the expansions that are easiest to defend at that point in time. This is the easiest for Stork to defend at this point in time. Very stable, reasonable follow-through. So look at this big army for Stork. We know Reavers are hiding in that shuttle. Doesn't seem like there's any chance for Best to win this game. And Stork's using his big advantage. Honestly, I would say the biggest advantage of this harassment is the fact that Stork got center map control. And Stork's exploiting that center map control to just expand and to tech very, very, very safely. See another shuttle moving around the edge of the map for Storky. Just gonna hang out there a little bit. So Stork kind of lets Best come down onto his low ground. Stork's moving back and forth here. I'm not going to talk too much about that in this game because I want the focus to be on the harassment. But yeah, see, when I saw that army from Best, I was like, man, good job for Best, right? Best has spent a lot of good focus just making sure that he's continuing to macro and not getting too shaken up from that harassment. Now watch this battle. It's Dragoons and Zealots and Templar. Huge tech completion for Stork. Ooh, a little bit of a slow harassment there, but watch this. Look at how close this battle ends up being. Look how much more stuff Stork has. Excuse me, I should say how much more stuff Stork theoretically has from having done this really big harassment. But this is a damn close battle. And of course, this battle, I was just watching that Archon, and I was just like, God, that Archon just takes so much damage. Now this is pretty close. I mean, both players are getting real low on stuff right about now, and Stork's going to have a little bit of an advantage. But look at this. After this huge battle, Stork lost everything there. Look at how close this battle was. And it's not like Stork did anything horribly wrong in this battle, like losing his Reaver with shuttles immediately. Stork's playing as normally as possible, right? But the fact of the matter is that Stork devoted so much to these outside harassment that he didn't quite have as many units as he normally would. Fortunately, Stork is still at the advantage because he's taken another gas expansion and his opponent has not. And right about now is when we're starting to really feel the advantage from doing that early harassment as Stork. But not any sooner. And that's this is an excellent double illustration of the point, right? First of all, that harassment, if you do it very carefully and cautiously, you can get these big advantages like Stork has right now. But even if you can't, even if you're Best and you're getting harassed like crazy, remember that you can still make a lot of units, and if you just hang in there, you're still giving your opponent a really big run for his money. I mean, now we're starting to see Stork slowly break in because Stork's doing a really good job of continuously harassing. But Stork can't really afford to do that much more expanding. Just really can't. And Best, even though he got those expansions earlier, and even though he was harassed like crazy as a result of taking those early expansions, Best is still hanging in there really well. Now it's pretty clearly inevitable that Best is going to lose, but you know, with that big battle, that was really close. And a lot of players, let's actually think about how Stork could have messed this up. Stork could have not taken this expansion and just tried to be really aggressive early on and try to break this front. Well, we clearly saw Best was able to crush the big army when Stork had the opportunity to macro. So before then, Best definitely would have been able to crush an early push. And then suddenly, if we hadn't expanded here, we wouldn't have this big economic advantage, and we would potentially end up losing. A big issue for players who don't think too critically about their harassment. They'll do a lot of harassment, they'll try to do a big run-in, it'll fail, and then they'll lose the game, and they'll feel really angry and be like, how was that possible? How is that even possible? And, of course, the reason is because harassment is really expensive, and you do a lot of damage with harassment for it to be okay. And even when you do a lot of damage, you're still pretty close. Normally what happens is players just get really angry and sort of keep doing the same thing over and over again and attribute the loss to some other aspect of their play. Maybe they'll end up changing their strategy or something like that. But no need to do that. I mean, look at Stork. Look at how he's continuing to harass. I love this game. All game long. Harass, 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 harass. Only one really big attack has happened so far, and all the rest has been constant harassment. And now Stork's just taken the whole map. This is brilliant. And look at this. At this point, you make your opponent come to you. You say, all right, cool, you're on 3 bases, 2 of which are about to mine out. I have almost 6 up. 3 are running really heavily. Here, you come attack me, and I'm going to force the issue on you. So we have this last big attack, and Best clearly now is finally starting to feel the serious economic disadvantage he's at. And there's virtually nothing that he can do at this point. I just thought that was a real nifty little game. And one thing that obviously feels really bad is being Best in that game, because basically you're being constantly harassed, like non-stop, just getting their front battered down. I mean, it's almost like Stork's, reaching through the monitor and like punching you repeatedly in the cheekbone, which is really, very sharp cheekbone if you're South Korean. So I mean, like, it's an awful experience, right? You've just been like on this slow, steady drain, but then you come out with your big attack and lose, and it's just like, oh god, it can be incredibly frustrating. But that's what you really want the game to be like as Stork. You don't want this big, huge harassment to happen and then a giant army to come in and kill your opponent. You kind of want a lot of harassment and then a normal game where you have slightly smaller armies, but you just play, very, very reasonably, nothing too extreme. So, yeah, I'd be more than happy to take a few questions. So let's go ahead and do that. So, Colossus says, what would be a good way to figure out how much damage you have done in your harassment for it to be advantageous? The normal way to think of it is to think of when the attack is going to come for you, or when you're going to make your normal attack. So let's take this is a really exaggerated example, right? Let's take Zerg vs. Terran. Let's say I have only ever gone Lurker Ling in my entire life. I've only ever done Lurker Zergling. And someone says, hey Sean, did you know that you can actually do Mutila's Harass, do serious damage to Terran? I go, now that's interesting. So I watched like 10 of my best Lurker Ling games, and I realized that at 9 minutes and 30 seconds, that's when the Terran push normally comes out. Especially if I've done almost no damage to him, it can even come out as early as 9 minutes. So I go, okay, I have that number in my head. And I also note that I'm getting defilers around 9 minutes and 45 seconds in my replay. So then what happens is I go do some Mutila's Harass, and I note that my opponent is now moving out at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and I'm getting my defiler at 10 minutes and 15 seconds. That is an example of an advantage. Instead of being 45 minutes behind with my defiler, I'm 15 seconds ahead with my defiler. That's sort of, again, that's kind of an extreme example. But generally, try to make sure you have a normal attack plan. Like, let's say, here's a really, oh yeah, I said 45 minutes. I meant 45 seconds. You know what I mean. Or let's say you're playing Terran against Protoss, and you have this really big death push plan, right, where you get some +1 upgrades and everything. Let's say you do this big death push, and it doesn't quite work out, or it has some degree of success, but you think, I want to try to incorporate some harassment into this play. Then what you end up doing is you start doing that harassment early, and you see on average if your push is easier or harder as a result. So, of course, you'll note that what I'm saying again and again, Colossus, is that whenever you want to do harassment, the measure of success should be, what was I going to do normally, and does that help me, right? Did my benchmark improve or, end up worse. I mean, a really great example of it ending up worse is when a Protoss player against a Zerg player moves out with his big army, and he has a whole bunch of Templar storming, and he does a bunch of damage, and then one day he thinks, I really want to do some storm drops. So he starts storm dropping a ton, and he inevitably loses the shuttle a bunch of times, but he feels like he killed off some drones. But then when he pushes out, he's like 3 Templar short. He ends up with like 4 less storms than he normally would, and as a result, the push is a lot weaker. In that case, he's actually at a disadvantage for having harassed. So that's what I would say is one of the most important parts of harassment, is to know what your underlying plan is and to see whether that's being improved or not improved. And what will eventually happen is it will become very clear. The reason I'm kind of talking at this higher level is it depends completely, really, really specifically on what that underlying plan is, because I can't say something like, well, if you invested 250 minerals and 100 gas in your harassment and you did a grand total of 400 minerals of probe damage, then you are 67% likely to be ahead. I mean, it really, really, really depends on the build, and using that underlying build as the benchmark is the thing that I'm going to repeat a million times in a row, because I think it's a very important point. So ASD says, would a proxy shield battery with Stork's goons, before harassing the men only, be a worthy investment since he already had the probe there? Absolutely not. I think that that's actually a very easy mistake to make that I personally think is a really egregious error. Because what ends up happening is that you invest all that money in that harassment, and then you're just like, yeah, there's no way he's going to ever get that expansion. And then meanwhile, he's expanded to his other outside ring expansion. He's built 4 more gateways than you, and then he just walks out and kills you. That is a really, really easy example. It also reminds me of way back when Hall of Valhalla was a really important map. My brother and I were playing on Hall of Valhalla, and he was playing Protoss, and I was playing Zerg. And my big strategy was to take one of the corner expansions. And for those of you unfamiliar with Hall of Valhalla, you start on an island, and the corner expansion is a really, really tiny, 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 tiny expansion. Very small land, just barely enough for you to land a command center, build a hatch, or whatever. So I wanted to expand to that because it's much easier to hold off Reaver harass. So my brother, the young, clever Protoss that he was, actually dropped a probe there and built a pylon and 2 cannons there. He eventually built 3 cannons there. And I remember sending my overlord, had my plan there, and I got there and I was like, oh my god, I can't expand here. I remember the first 2 games he did it, I actually lost. And he started to think that, this is going to be my standard play, building, pylons and cannons at this expansion. And then what I did is I just expanded to somewhere else, and he would lose horribly badly, And obviously these are the days when my brother and I probably would have struggled to maintain a 0 points on Icy Cup. We'd probably go almost certainly into the negative back then. But that is a great example of how there's a way to strengthen some sort of defense of some area, when really you don't even need to strengthen defense. You've already done the adequate amount of damage. So, Sizz Adrenaline says, when throwing down storms in PvP, what should be your key targets? Big clumps of Templar or what? Templar can't be bad. Reavers are always a really easy big target, but sometimes you don't want to be going for the Reavers because they're a little bit far back and won't do any damage anyways. An excellent example of where to throw storms you should watch is Backhoe versus Han. I actually did a Day 9 daily on that. It's really important that rather than what units to do, it should be... oh, hold on, I have some carbonation coming back up. Oh, that was fantastic. There we go. In Han vs. Backhoe, Han was very good at pulling units around that would cause Backhoe's units to clump, and then he would storm the clumps. So Zealots are a very, very easy target to storm based upon that clumping. But probably clumps are always going to be the best, and Templar also can't be bad because you sort of negate the storms. Generally, if you're going for your opponent's Templar, it should be that you have fewer Templar. Like if I have 1 or 2 Templar against your 5, if I can get all of them in a storm, clearly going to be at a big advantage. So let's see. Cause I'm a Ninja says, why did Stork move back with his army when he transferred to the 9 o'clock? Why did he let Best out of his ramp before they traded armies? It's always good to keep good troop movement in the middle to make sure there's not going to be any sort of weird counter-harassment going on. And, that's part of the motivation of it. It's really easy to regroup with your army. Instead of staying still and sending your reinforcements, you pull everything back and have your reinforcements meet in the middle and then advance forward again. I think he probably could have kept the contain a little bit longer, but I wasn't focusing too much on it. I was focusing much more on the harassment, so maybe you should just watch for that again and see if you can find some insight into that. But, it really can't be bad when you're at that economic position. I mean, part of it is that you don't actually have the biggest concave outside your opponent's ramp. It's actually pretty small. Let's actually look at the map. So, I mean, over here, like, early on, if I have a pretty small Dragoon number, and I'm, like, right here, it's, like, let's say I have 8 Dragoons. I'm obviously going to be in an advantage here. But once I get, like, 40 Dragoons, I mean, you have to have some of them back here. And it's pretty awkward if your opponent's good at dropping Reavers right here and then running his army. I mean, look at it. It's almost like a very clear line right here to move your troops down. And then you can kind of actually get a pretty decent concave versus concave fight going on here. You can even probably squeeze Reavers back there for a few extra free shots and then just bounce back and swing around. Yeah, I think that once you get too many units, it doesn't actually become the most effective contain. Something like that, yeah. These are all sorts of things I'd think about. At that point, I just think Stork was in the lead. So let us see here. Benson says, was there anything Best could have done to turn the game around? I actually think that big push he made at the bottom of his ramp would have worked had he not lost those 2 shuttles worth of units. That's actually part of the reason why I love this game, is that Best actually lost 2 shuttles worth of units. And still had an extremely close fight. Imagine if Best had not had those units die. He may have been able to push out effectively, cut Stork's army in half, and then just go for the weaker expansion hidden away. And then Best naturally would have been able to take his own expansion. So I think that was a big aspect of it. What else could Best have done? I think that maybe trying to expand to his other outside ring expansion a little bit better, or excuse me, a little bit earlier would have been a little bit better. I don't think there's any counter-harassment that Best could have done, because, I mean, think about the expansions that Stork had. I mean, if we go back to this main screen, we know that Stork had his natural here, and he has main here with, like, pylons here, and he had some guys over here. There's no good place to harass if it's just these 2 expansions. So I think that was very good planning on Stork's part. I just think Best should have taken that other expansion a little earlier, and then maybe had a nice timing push where he moved out with a bunch of Speed Zealots. I didn't really see any Speed Zealots there, but he's almost certainly low on money. So those are the things that I would think about there. So we just have time for about 2 more questions. Devil Zero says, is there any other way to get this advantage Stork has without harassing, like having the Gas Expo first and the Contain too? Yeah, I honestly think that you can play the identical way that Stork played, and instead of going for harassment, you just go for everything else that he went for. You can move out with that early set of units, and instead of using those early units to do any sort of harassment, you can use those early units to set up a contain. And then you can get the Reaver out, and then you have an even stronger contain. And then you can, with the money you didn't spend on the harassment, you can expand to one of your outside expansions a little earlier. A lot of options right there. A lot of times you can think of it as, instead of expanding, I'm going to harass him. Because the expansion will get me, 20 economic units ahead. Like, let's say there's an imaginary unit that's called, your economic strength. Expanding will get you 20 units ahead. Or if you harass him, you'll put him 20 units behind. You're still getting a 20-unit difference in there. So that's something to think about. So, yeah. Just 2 more questions. Stay Frosty says, what could have Best done aside from getting lucky and killing Stork's shuttle? Again, just kind of referring back to the expansion and having good timing pushes to get out of that. Because, if you think about it, in Terran vs. Zerg, when the Terran opponent is doing the Zerg opponent is doing a ton of Mutalisk harass, how does the Terran counter it? Well, the Terran just sort of holds on, tries to make the harassment do as little damage as possible, and then moves out with a huge army that the Mutalisks aren't really good at dealing with. And then the Terran wins that way. So a lot of counter timing pushes, I think, are important. Let's see here. Frozen Cat Killer says, isn't the main reason that Stork had that battle so close was because he was tacking in a narrow choke? I definitely think that that's part of it. I think that's definitely a pretty big factor involved in that, but I think it's equally important to give credit to Best's really nice macro and really kind of calm as he was holding off Dragoon harass, then Reaver harass, then more Dragoon harass, and then Dark Templar harass, and then more Dragoon harass, and then he still had this really good army. I mean, it's pretty incredible play by our friendly neighborhood best. So I will just take one more question. Let's see. Oh man, what is the best one ever? Oh man, I really want it to be a good one. Let's see here. Man, I'll answer this one and another one. Draenix said, would it be viable in any other matchup, PvZ, after your last expansion, to place offensive cannons behind your opponent's mineral only with your scouting probe on Outsider? I just don't think that's the best, because it's like you're committing to the harassment. It becomes a stationary act. I mean, what we saw in this game is that Stork dropped some Dragoons, and then when things got scary, Stork was able to leave with the Dragoons. They were able to contribute to the rest of his play. The shuttle that was used to harass was able to come back and port the Reavers around. But if you bring a pylon, or if you bring a probe to build pylons and cannons, your opponent can just ignore it and go kill you, and then you have cannons and pylons sitting there that will do nothing for the whole game. So yeah, I will take one more question that happened before the pause. Endgame's asking a question that's good, but I think I already asked it. This question I love by Jade Fist. Perfect. This is the ending question by Jade Fist. Thank you. It says, is it generally better to expand or to continue aggression after a successful harassment? That is really map dependent on, like, for instance, let's look at Outsider. We clearly see that if we harass our opponent a little bit here and kill off some probes, when he comes back to mining, it's still a very harassable expansion. But imagine for a moment if Stork was up here, and then instead of it being best as Protoss down here, if it was some Terran player. A Terran player might be able to do some very successful harassment by dropping vultures here and then killing stuff off here. But after that first harassment, our opponent gets enough stuff so that he can actually hold off our harassment very, very easily. So I think that's an example where continued harassment and aggression might not be the best. What I would say is that when you're looking at your map and considering the terrain, think to yourself, is this an area of terrain that I'm exploiting in order to harass? Or is it the timing of this harassment that's making it good? So like in the Terran vs. Protoss example I gave, it's the timing of the really fast vultures that's allowing that harassment to be successful. If we look at Outsider, it is this terrain that is causing the harassment to be successful. Another example of terrain would be on match point. My natural expansion on match point is really close to a low ground ridge that you can put a stormer on and hit my workers from there, or even put a tank on and hit my workers from there. So that is the sort of consideration that you should make. You know, it's very easy on match point to advance with a big army and continue to storm things there. So what I would say is that it's generally like, I would say, preference. It was entirely possible for Stork in this game to just do the harassment with the initial Dragoons and then to not worry about it too much. He could have just done the initial harassment with the Dragoons and then completely ignored any sort of other harassment opportunities and just taking that as an opportunity to expand and to do that sort of thing. I think that would have been a completely good alternative. And before I end, I'm going to have to ban some people. We have some people who are not being clever ban forever. Yay! Hooray! Doing a forever ban, I think, is what we need to do. Yes! Fantastic. And that is a great way to celebrate the end of Day 9 Daily number 37. Day 9 Daily number 40 is coming up here soon. And anytime I hit a multiple of 20, I do a big map analysis. So I think I'm going to end up doing match point because I really, really like that match point map quite a bit. So then after that, and maybe another 3 weeks I'll be taking more replay submissions. So yeah, that's going to be it. I am off. I am going to go watch, actually, I'm actually going to make this a public announcement. There was a player whose name I won't name because I don't know if he's comfortable with me doing that. He sent me this unbelievably detailed write-up of what he thought would be a viable strategy, and it's actually centered around scouts. And if any of you are ever interested in giving me some strategies that you want to think about, if you do something really extensive like what this guy did, then I'd be more than happy to look at it. If you say, "Hey, watch this replay. What do you think I did? Think I could have improved?" I mean, chances are I won't be able to put in the appropriate effort because I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking about. But if you send out a really extensive, unbelievably beautiful write-up with like 16 replays that this guy did and all the possible thoughts and all the variations and how this game would, how you'd be able to deal with it, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it. So, yeah, I am heading out. That is the end of Day 9 Daily and number 37. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody, and cheers.